Welcome to The Independent Workforce, the podcast where we explore the now and the future of work through the lens of temporary employment, such as freelancers, contractors, fractional experts, you name it. Here we speak with CEOs, recruiters, founders, and industry leaders about how they work with independent talent, the wins, the challenges, and the lessons learned. My name is Yurii. I'm growing the freelance market at FreelancerMap, an international platform that's been connecting top independent professionals with companies for over 20 years. And my guest is Tony Buffum, a transformational HR leader and head of enterprise strategy at Amazing Human Cloud, that I personally love this company and amazing people behind this, who works with global enterprises, investors, and governments to design flexible workforce programs and unlock the power of independent talent. And also who lives by the quote of another Tony Robbins: don't be afraid of new ideas, be afraid of old ones. So welcome, Tony.
Excited to be on this podcast with you.
You know, the funniest thing is that I'm currently reading the book of Tony Robbins, Money
Really?
Masters the Game, and I really inspired by him. So I feel like one more thing to click, and just in addition to, those freelance economy and all the things. So let's jump right into it. So tell me, what role do you play in shaping how large enterprises access freelance talent?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And again, thanks for having me on this podcast. I love talking to folks that have been a part of trying to make this, what's clearly the future of work, a reality for so many people and organizations. It's happening, but we can be an accelerant. And that's one of the key roles, is accelerating adoption for enterprises, making something that seems scary, just like that quote. People tend to be afraid of doing something that's new and different, but it's not that different. It can be challenging, but we can make that easier. What I think they should be afraid of is continuing to do the same thing that they've always done in a market dynamic and economy that's dramatically different thanks to technology and just changing preferences. So I think of really one of the key roles that we play is building the front door to define how organizations can start to embrace and engage when to use freelancers versus FTEs versus SOWs versus traditional staffing and standardize that approach just to make it more approachable. And I think another key role is translating and architecting what that experience is like to help leaders move from being that ad hoc or sometimes rogue freelancer spend to an intentional, what I call talent access strategy instead of acquisition. And that to me sums up this new world that we live in. The idea that you're going out and acquiring talent, they belong to you, they're fixed on just you and your organization, and they can't do anything else, is really a bygone mentality. Instead, organizations should be thinking about the skills that they need. How can I just tap them when I need them, how I need them to get this work done, and also always have them available for when the work comes back. So those are all different roles that we juggle in trying to deliver the acceleration of this future of work to enterprises, small businesses, and talent alike.
You know, I feel like it's a huge part of shifting exactly from owning someone to accessing them, like from owning person to accessing their skills. And I feel like it's a huge gap in between. I feel like just we are starting to tap into this economy and into this market. And you've been here on this market for like dozens of years. You know everything. So what's happening? What's going on in the market? Like, tell me.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a pretty significant pendulum swing from the historic long-term staffing that my dad went through. My dad graduated from college, went to work for Xerox, and spent his whole 40-plus year career there and retired with a pension, just like we kind of grew up thinking that most people would. But that same company is well known for massive layoffs that eventually hit, just like Kodak, both of them in Rochester, New York, where I grew up. And we continue to see that dynamic where it's become very common, almost expected, that large public companies that are under pressure when they're getting ready to announce some earnings just use this as a really easy lever to pull to just dump a bunch of employees when they want to change direction. And that loyalty and that commitment or almost paternalistic relationship that companies have with employees has really disappeared. It's far more transactional. And that's to be expected too. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more frictionless to move from company to company, and to find new opportunities when all of us, you and I, we connected first on LinkedIn, and our whole resumes and all of our experience and all of our skills are listed electronically. So anybody that needs our skills, is interested in what we do, can find us in seconds. And those dynamics coming together have created this desire to change this paradigm that we've lived in. And we're seeing it, in a large part driven by talent itself, especially white collar talent, traditional office jobs. We see the people or the talent in those jobs wanting to be independent, choosing to work independently or as freelancers, and choosing to have multiple clients and have a more customer-driven mentality towards their work, instead of, I just want this one full-time job and I'll just climb a ladder slowly towards what will be my eventual retirement. So I think there's this massive pendulum swing. Talent has a lot more leverage than they used to, and there's a need for organizations to move dynamically, change dynamically, and you can't do that. I lived it for decades. You can't adjust very quickly when all you have is full-time talent. Even when you have kind of temp to hire traditional contingent talent, you're not going to get the skills you need when you need them. You're not going to be able to respond to changing technology and market dynamics if those are your only two levers. So I think organizations are waking up to this fact and looking for what are those alternatives. How do we engage them while staying compliant? And how do we make sure we do that in a way that delivers ROI to the rest of our business?
Yeah, I feel like it's a good question to ask every company that is currently still having this old own people model. And I feel like I have like dozens of conversations with hiring and recruiters, and they tell that it's getting harder and harder to get good talents. And of course, if you are okay, if you can spend time like 3-6 months a year on hiring the person you want, maybe it works for you. But I feel like the world is changing so fast, especially with all this AI thing. I hear the news, and every podcast that I hear about AI or every book that I'm reading about AI, it's like, as the moment of now, this is how it works. Because in a week or in a month, it can change. And I feel like we are really, really like running the same thing with a workforce. Because right now, okay, it's still pretty like it was like 10, 20 years ago. Plus minus, you can still go and hire talents. It's getting harder. There are more and more freelancers. The more and more people want, as you've said, work with multiple clients. They don't want to be owned. They want to be cherished, and they also have to feel that they're experts. And also the career ladder is such a huge question. And you've been inside in the organizations. You've done this yourself, and now you're working on kind of the other side of like helping the organization to tap into this world. So tell me, how large enterprises actually hire freelancers in reality, in practice?
Yeah, large organizations, I think there's a couple different avenues. One, they might already work with independent contractors that they've organized through themselves. They might have very loose controls. I've talked to enterprises that know that they have dozens and sometimes even hundreds of independent workers, that they have a contract with each one of them. Each worker, there isn't a whole lot of standardization. Importantly, there's very little tracking or management. And in those situations, what they desperately need is some kind of freelance management system to organize it. And there's great ones out there, but I think the important thing is when you're managing that type of population and you're not doing it through a partner, then you need to have some control over it so that you can ensure it remains compliant, and so that you can mitigate risks. So you're tracking what that spend is and also what type of work is getting done. And I looked at it when I was an HR practitioner and I was bringing in freelancers and independent workers. There's always this kind of tug of war between procurement and HR. Who really owns this relationship? Because it's not full-time employees. And a lot of HR people feel like, if it's not full-time, I don't want it on my radar. My view was, if it's a person working with our company, I want to be aware of what's going on, and I want some way to track and measure it, because if we can get data around that utilization, we can make better decisions in our workforce planning around where do we make investments in full-time versus a more flexible and agile contractor independent workforce. But that tug of war is valuable as long as those functions are working together. And they're typically also working, of course, with where the demand is coming from, some operator. Oftentimes it starts in marketing and technology. They're partnering with finance to make, build that argument for where they transfer budget or reallocate a budget to support these kind of programs. And they're also working with legal. And so all the functions need to be getting involved, which is a lot. And I think that's the biggest challenge inside corporations, even small and medium-sized businesses, is when you're thinking of this as an opportunity and the light bulb goes off and you're like, this can help us solve a lot of needs, a lot of burning platforms. This can really address some of our capacity issues. Then when they start to think of the implementation, it feels like a lot of work, because making it happen, especially if you can find a marketplace that has a great history and has a great reputation, you can find the right compliance partners. It's not as hard as it seems, but it seems hard because it's so different. When I was at Upwork, we used to talk about our biggest competitor was status quo. And so I often say the challenge inside organizations is often not understanding that this is an urgent issue and that there's a great solution. It's the change management that goes along with it. And it's getting helping to drive the mindset shift around working with people that aren't full-time employees for you, but that do want to be a part of your success. And how do you delegate and manage that work? And how do you embrace that skills and the talent that you need may not always be in a commutable distance from your headquarters building? So I think that's the biggest challenge, and that's where there's a lot of work that needs to be done, is in that change management and getting all the functions on board and committed to this as a part of a really valuable and important workforce strategy, not only now, but into the future, to create some sustainability for your workforce.
Like, what can we do? I mean, like, what people like you and me and platforms and all those people in between, the recruiting companies who are working with freelancers and with companies, with the end clients, who are helping to be this intermediary and to deal with all this management part. What can we do? How can we take all this extra work from the plates of HR, procurement, you name it? How can we make it easier for them to finally work with freelancers?
Yeah, I think, a lot of marketplaces, when they start interacting with the business, and the business has shown some interest, they're curious about how they can leverage this different kind of alternative staffing approach to work for the organization. They're looking for small successes. And we always hear, start small, get a couple success stories, and then share that within the organization. And when a marketplace can take a project or a deliverable and deliver that below the traditional budget that a enterprise might have pursued originally, they can deliver it. The number one value proposition is much faster, because they can find talent really quickly, get them deployed in days, not weeks or months, like we talked about earlier. And do all that with quality. Those are the things that I think help win over those small success stories that then convince the champions to run through the rest of the business, say, we can do this, this can work. When they can do that, then the issue and the challenge is just scale. It's getting more people to buy in to those success stories. What we can do, even without getting fully engaged with an enterprise, is make sure that we're documenting and sharing those business cases that other folks can read about and learn about and say, hey, I've got a similar challenge in my business. I wonder if I could deploy the same solution. And when they do, that's a catalyst. That's when the light bulb goes off and they start to recognize, this is easier than I thought. Now we just need to take it to the next level. So it's more than anything, it's just getting started. Finding the right marketplace, that fits all of your cross-functional needs and just get started with some projects so that you can build from there. The sooner, the better, because time is going, like all these challenges are getting more complex and more challenging the more time goes by.
You know, when I hear the word finding, I can already imagine like the fear in the eyes of people. Oh my God, I have to make a research. How do I choose the right one? There is so much responsibility. And it's always like, you know, to start small, to share small success stories, you have to get quality from the very beginning. So if someone is starting just to tap into this contractors, freelancers, whatever you name it, like this market, where should they go? How should they start doing it?
I mean, the most obvious answer is Human Cloud. That's why we exist. That's why I joined Matt Matola and Human Cloud, because it fits right in that gap where organizations are trying to get started. They need a bridge to identify the best solutions. And as we both know, being in this space for a while, it's huge. You know, back in 2017, when I started looking for a freelance marketplace, there was probably 50 or so that I would check out, and we went through our own RFP process. Now there's thousands, because this is such a massive growing part of the labor movement globally. So it can be overwhelming. And then that's just selecting and trying to identify the right marketplace. Never mind, how do you make sure you've got the right compliance with that marketplace? What level of indemnification do you feel like you need? How are you going to classify work? What do you do about things like business insurance? There's so many things. How's everybody going to get paid? There's so many things you might have to stitch together. At Human Cloud, we've done our best, and we're continuing to pull in all of those solutions into one place, leverage things like posting their business cases in a way that people can download them, share them across their organization. Things like Kudos that are really the reputation builder. That's how we shop now. A lot of our work or a lot of things that we buy as consumers, whether it's, you know, in our personal lives or professional, we want to know what other people thought. We want that trust. That's the number one thing that Human Cloud tries to bring to this space, is trust through things like reputation building, through things like badging and certifications, things that make you feel more comfortable with what all these different platforms are, that tie to that matching process. What's your need? What are you looking for? And we can provide not only that marketplace, but maybe the supporting solutions that help you stitch it all together. That's what we exist for. And we can even help you find the consultants and teams that can help guide you through that change management process. So that's the purpose of Human Cloud. And we endeavor to automate and speed that up every day, because the faster and easier it happens, the more accessible it is, the more organizations of all sizes will embrace it and get started.
This episode of The Independent Workforce is brought to you by FreelancerMap, the home of freelancing. Whether you are looking to hire top freelance talent fast or a freelancer ready to find your next big project, FreelancerMap connects the right people with the right work. No endless job boards, no guesswork, just direct access to verified experts and opportunities across the globe. Visit freelancermap.com and start building your next success story today. You know, coming back to mindset and change management. So when stakeholders hesitate to hire freelancers, what are they really afraid of? Like, what's behind it? Is it like they are afraid of losing control, or about the risk, or getting some fines? Like, what's really bothers them?
I think there's kind of two buckets. One is just the myths that exist around freelancer, or words like gig. You know, people have historically associated that with low skill, quick turn work. And I did a presentation with a while ago around with Jeff Mike, who's a guy I respect in this space, because we wanted to address that head on, and we called it, you know, just kind of debunking the myths around freelancing. And there's things like that, like it's low skill work. It's not. Upwork did some really interesting research last year that highlighted that over 28% of white collar workers identify themselves as freelance or independent. So this more high skilled typically also remote work is being done from folks that are contractors or working out of their homes or working remotely because they choose that kind of work. And as we see students coming out of school, more than 50% go straight into independent work full time instead of just taking one job with the company long term, like we've historically seen. But it's the myth that, okay, it's only this kind of work, or if it's kind of like a gig work, well, that's like for people that can't get a real job. Or let's take it to another level. It's often their fear that there's no commitment, and you mentioned that the sense of like a lack of control over the loyalty or the relationship, the culture that will be impacted by having freelancers and independent contractors on your team. And the fact of the matter is, those folks have a very customer-focused, driven mentality where they want to make sure that they're very clearly identifying what the deliverables and objectives are, what success looks like up front, which frankly, we don't often define for full-time employees. It's just kind of this moving target. And they want to make sure they exceed that goal, especially because regardless of the marketplace they're a part of, there's some kind of reputational grade, the 5-star, rating or whatever, that reflects the work that they've done, as opposed to, the traditional, you're just looking at a resume and trusting that whatever they say they can do, they actually can do. In this world, in this marketplace dynamic, all of it is based on reputation. What have you done? How can you prove that you can do what you're saying that you can do for us? So I think those are the biggest hesitations. But even if they get past that, it's often things around classification and compliance. They hear a couple of really scary stories about misclassification, lawsuits and fines impacting organizations. And they just immediately say, I don't want that to happen to me. I either only want to directly employ people, or I want to shift that responsibility to another provider. And so I think those type of things hold organizations back. And understandably, those regulations are constantly changing. In 2024, there's a new federal contractual rule in the US. There's a big new rule getting implemented in the UK. So there's so many things that I think make organizations really, really scared to step into this space. But the fact of the matter is, marketplaces, EORs, all the providers around it, they're solving for this for the enterprise. So don't be scared about the potential of what might happen. Certainly get your risk and your compliance folks involved, but the answer is out there. It's been solved. It's just a matter of getting past those fears and embracing what's possible.
I recently finished the book of our previous guest, Yurii Lopez, and he wrote a book, The Future of Work. And he talked about the system based on blockchain that actually has all the feedback, all the work that freelancers did, and they have it like in the system, and everyone can easily check this. So I feel like these times are coming. I think that it will be easier and easier for freelancers to actually tell them like, hey, here is how it is, here is how it works. And I think that it can be also some of those myths be busted because of that. And since we were talking about myths, what the reality looks like, what are the benefits of hiring freelancers? Like, are those benefits actually higher than all those things that people are afraid of?
Yeah, they are. I mean, the biggest thing that I think organizations, like I just touched on, that they need to mitigate is risk around classification and compliance. There's so many solutions that help them do that. That shouldn't stop anyone. But the biggest benefit, I'll talk about costs, I'll talk about talent and tech, but the biggest benefit is really speed. You've got talent that's vetted, and in this contractual relationship, you got marketplaces that are really exceptional about matching the right talent to your skill need and your deliverables. The fact that you can bring the talent that you need on in a matter of days. When I was a practitioner, sometimes it was hours. You need to get a certain kind of work done. You're struggling, like you said. Organizations already right now struggle to find the staff that they need. when you boil it down to just the skills required to deliver the tasks you needed to deliver the outcomes that you're projecting, when you focus on those skills, you can actually find that talent incredibly fast. And sometimes it may exist in one person or it may exist across a small team, but you can get that talent and you can get it deployed so quickly that it allows you to turn projects around so much faster, close gaps, from a product development standpoint or a delivery standpoint, or even when organizations are going through major tech implementations, or they're trying to centralize some features or activities within their business, leveraging technology automation. That can feel like a pretty foreboding task if you're not the most advanced technology team, but you can rent that technology skill set to help you get that implemented so you don't keep putting it off and you get the benefit sooner. It's a long way to say the number one value proposition, I think, in this space is speed to talent. Speed to get it talent working for you. But because, I'll add to that, because you're really focusing on just what you need to get the job done, you're not holding on to talent for all this extra time. You're not paying for all this other, ambiguous activity that happens. You're really just paying for the deliverable. I think that's also what makes fractional executives so desirable now, especially for SMBs, but really at any level, is you get the expertise you need. They deliver for you when when it makes sense and when you need it, and then they move on to something else. And at the same time, they're getting broader experience working on similar or complementary projects at other places. All of those things benefit the organization that they're doing a current project with. So speed, and at the end of the day, it is going to cost less than going out and hiring full-time talent. And it, most importantly, gives you, especially in this really unpredictable, fast-changing environment, it gives you agility with your workforce. And I think the best example, when ChatGPT blew up, and all of a sudden people wanted to get their heads around LLMs, how they can benefit their organization, they immediately went out and wanted to hire prompt engineers because they didn't really understand how can you get the most out of these tools. But do you really want to hire that skill set if it's brand new? Or do you just want to rent it until you understand it and you can demonstrate or prove that this is something that we need long-term? We need it 40 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, or we just need it through this phase, through this quarter. When organizations can experiment more and test new technology capabilities with the skill sets they bring on board and learn from the talent they're bringing on board, they can make much faster, smarter decisions, and they can flex in and out of those needs as the market dictates.
It's also a great use case of how to really work with freelancers, because you can always hire them as coaches, as trainers, as consultants, as an expert who've been there, done that, who can even move your team forward. So they're working with your team. Of course, they're not working in their bubble. They're working with your team, and then your team is getting up to speed and they can do all those things by themselves afterwards. So you are, as you've said, you are renting skills, and then you are implementing them in your workforce, in your working model. And let's imagine the situation. So some project manager initiated the process of hiring freelancers. They went to their manager said, okay, here is a budget, go for it. What will block them? Where will they stop in hiring freelancer?
Once they've gotten the budget, probably what's going to slow them down is just being overwhelmed by the selection process. I mean, ideally, there is already a marketplace that the organization has a partnership with, so that they don't have to worry about the hurdles of compliance or even the administration. The next thing that might overwhelm them is, I'm not used to defining work in this way. I'm used to writing a job description that's somewhat kind of generic and covers all types of things that might need to happen, and just getting a body with general skill set that now I can delegate things to, and that they can figure out how to close all the gaps. So it's when I first started looking for freelancers, I remember the marketplace I was working with, when they asked the question, all right, beyond kind of what you have in a traditional job description, what does success look like? I immediately had the mentality of, why don't we always ask this question? Because anybody looking for a job, they want to know that because they want to be successful. When we're looking at a project and we're posting a project, that's a different way of thinking about how to find someone. This is what success looks like. These are the skills required to deliver that success. Can you do these things? And can you work around this schedule, or can you meet these project deliverable timelines? That's it. But it's very new to a lot of folks. And once they post those jobs and they start getting people bidding or trying, sending you offers to work on those jobs, that's a very different dynamic than what they're used to, which is that traditional, you get the resumes, you go through the interview process. Again, just the fact that it's different can make people uncomfortable and feel like they're not quite sure how to manage in this dynamic. But the fact of the matter is, oftentimes, whether it's a broad marketplace where they're bidding, or if it's a curated marketplace where the marketplace is matching you directly to that pre-selected talent, it's just different. And for folks that are looking to hire that talent, it can be overwhelming. One of the things I often tell folks, you really can't make a bad decision. Once you have all the data and you know it matches what you need to get done, it doesn't have to be perfect. If you're meeting all of your needs, and if you're not sure, then, well, once I select that person, how do I manage them? Have a candid conversation with them about it. I think a lot of times hiring managers, when they're experimenting or they're trying something like this new, they feel like they have to have all the answers, and that's a part of feeling like that means they're in control. The fact of the matter is, they're working with someone that probably has more expertise in this workforce dynamic than they do. Just ask them. They're happy to tell you, this is what works really well for me. This is what has worked well in the past. These kind of rhythms or these kind of updates, this type of sharing of communication, both async or live. They can help you find what the right boundaries are and work that out up front because they've had a lot of experience with it. And that can help reduce some of that friction or some of that hesitation for new hiring managers in this on-demand workforce.
When they finally hire this person, what they should give to a freelancer, contractor, you name it, to ensure that this person starts working right away, not to block them from getting what they are there to bring?
Yeah, I think they need to think really clearly and carefully about what's necessary for success for this contractor or freelancer. Because when we onboard an employee, we don't necessarily think of what's required. We just think of how do we expose them to everything. And then as they move through that orientation or that assimilation period, they'll figure out where to prioritize themselves. And we'll hook them up with a buddy and they'll kind of point them where to go. With a contractor, they don't have to try to boil the ocean when they get on board. They just need to know what's pertinent to their project and their deliverable. And that includes who are the right team members, get them introduced. What are the tools they need to use? Establish those communication rhythms and channels. Set those expectations clearly up front and make sure to ask them what they feel like they need. That's a really quick, easy conversation. And that's a simple checklist, but not doing that and kind of treating it like it's an employee that's going to figure out as they go will slow down their ability to hit the ground running. It'll slow down the traction to getting results out quickly.
Now, if you were to remove just one blocker from this, hiring, payment, procurement, you name it, process, to actually speed up the moment from having this project description to actually hiring freelancer and starting working, what would it be?
I mean, to me, the biggest blocker is often getting tied down with the MSAs and trying, it's usually an employer identifies a marketplace they want to work with and everybody's excited and they got projects that they've been discussing that now they're ready to test out and deploy within a marketplace partnership. But then everything gets bogged down between legal and procurement and HR everybody taking their turn to try to redline all the risks, everything they're worried about out, on a paper to get all the scary things away. And it's usually by folks that haven't done this before. So they're just trying to take all liability and get it away from their company. The fact of the matter is there has to be some give and take. There has to be some level of agreement. And there's organizations where these marketplaces have figured this out successfully with large, huge at-risk organizations multiple times over. There's a solution in there, and it doesn't have to be overly bureaucratic. But oftentimes that's where everything slows down. And when you take that momentum of discovery and interest and intrigue and energy, and you slow it down with that bureaucracy, all of a sudden when it's time to go, things have been diluted. Like the interest level has faded away. Out of the necessity to keep work going, you've kind of already gone back to the old way of doing things. Now you need to kind of shake and energize that base all over again. So I think that part of I would love to be able to speed that up. That's actually what we're working at Human Cloud now, is trying to automate and standardize those steps to get you confidently into that process so much faster. Literally from I have a need to now I have a marketplace and I have talent in days, as opposed to the first time I started doing this at a large enterprise, it was literally months until, some higher level executive than me lit a fire under the team and said, we need to put this into action more quickly. So oftentimes that's where things get slowed down. It's not really in, once all that's cleared, certainly there's growing pains, but things keep moving relatively quickly. It's that bureaucracy that slows things down.
What I also hear behind your words is that you have to start somewhere. And as you move forward, you keep building, you are developing the processes. And like sometimes later you will like, oh my God, we didn't have this process 3 months ago. Is it even possible? It's so easy and straightforward. Why didn't we do this before? And I feel like as to your point, as you've mentioned it like many times before, that people are afraid of change. And they're afraid to start. And I feel like you have to start, you have to do this first step. And I feel like you are doing a really amazing job at Human Cloud, of helping people to make this kind of like, guide them, like take them by the hand and show them, hey, here is what you have to do with compliance. Here is a marketplace. Here is how you get freelancers paid. So it's super easy. Yeah, they need to definitely work with you.
Yurii, it makes me think of, as you're talking, I'm thinking of, man, I don't remember the internal battle I went through before I finally started using Uber versus I used to travel all the time and always land somewhere and rent a car. So you have to go to the rental car place or just land, in a new city and hail a taxi. And that was, just kind of, that was the way I assumed it'd always be done. Now, if I travel somewhere, I almost never rent a car. I'm always just jumping in my Uber or my Lyft app. But there's an internal battle you need to go through, and all of a sudden trusting that this person in their own car is going to come pick you up in this location and drop you off, and that they're going to know how to get there. Things like the invention and adoption of GPS and these transparent rating systems have made us a lot more comfortable with this happening. The same thing as like, rather than just find somebody in my neighborhood that's going to walk my dog, I can go on an app now, find an independent worker that's nearby that has all these ratings and loves work. I can see pictures of them and their history, and I can hire them to go walk my dog. But it doesn't just happen automatically. It took some adjustment and adoption for all of us to start trusting these systems. At Human Cloud, we want to build that trust through transparency, through credibility, through rating systems, the things that we're accustomed to in a lot of our consumeristic, parts of our life, bring that to this experience to make it easier to get over that hurdle. But I recognize, like, it's not like Uber announced that it existed and I immediately downloaded the app. It probably took me a while to start, embracing that. And now, I use it every day almost.
There are always some trailblazers and
Yeah.
someone who has to go first and then share it with the friends. And I think that there are a lot of companies already out there, such as NASA, Microsoft, Airbus, who are trailblazing this path and show, hey, it's not that hard. Here is how it works. Like, go follow us. And like I really love this example that you made with Uber because people trust their lives to random people on random cars and they cannot hire a freelancer. It's so weird, like in a work, usually, okay, there are some professions where some life risk involved, but usually, currently, where people hire freelancers the most, there is no life risk. You won't hire a freelance surgeon, most likely. But overall, all the dentists and all the surgeons, they kind of freelancers all the time. And yeah, Tony, I really have so many questions and I still wish to have the sky as a limit, but time is the limit. So the
Of
final
course.
one. What advice would you give to companies just starting to use freelancers and to freelancers entering the market?
So I'll start with freelancers entering the market. I think there's lots of opportunities. There's lots of great marketplaces. I think they can find a marketplace that's a great fit for them. I don't. Marketplaces aren't mutually exclusive. You can belong to multiple marketplaces. The biggest challenge with freelancers getting started is just getting those first several jobs. Because, like I mentioned earlier, this is a reputation-based place. So in a reputation-based workforce dynamic. So when you don't have history that you can point to or ratings or customer reviews, it's harder to get those first few. Just like it's probably a little bit intimidating to get in an Uber that doesn't have any stars yet, any reviews yet. You don't know where to, but when you get into one that's 4.9 stars and they've done 1,000 rides, you've got a lot of confidence. Well, that's how a lot of enterprises buy. So whatever you can do to build out those initial experiences will help you get started that much faster. A lot of times that's partnering through a marketplace that will put you on a team or help you find those opportunities. So I encourage people to look at all of those options. Just like I tell enterprises, just get started. And you don't have to be a full-time independent worker to get started. Lots of people already freelance or do independent work as a side hustle to their full-time gig, as they're starting to build this safety net before they make that full switch. That's very common. What I'd say for enterprises, you've already touched on it. One, it's just get started. But if you are getting started, really make sure that you're tracking. To me, it's incredibly important. Establish your baseline. So if we hadn't gone to this alternative staffing or resourcing path, what would we have done? What would we have spent? How long would it have taken us? And you can assess that by what you've done in the past. Look at your standard hiring process, maybe for similar roles or skills. How long it took, what was the cost, what's the fully loaded cost, how long it takes for that person. We used to always measure this, especially with sales, but maybe technicians in the field. How long until they're accretive to their role, like they're adding value versus just still learning and absorbing resource and help from others. When do they become independent and when are they driving value? So measure all of those things, because when you start working with freelancers, you'll blow all of those statistics away, but you won't know how good you've got it if you don't know where you would have started and if you can't contrast it to the alternative. When you can show how much faster you're able to engage that talent, what the cost was, and how quickly you got the result, that is a win that you'll want to share across the business to build confidence and trust that this isn't something that's as scary as it seemed at the outset. It can be a secret weapon, frankly. And I think we're past the point of trailblazing. This has been around for quite some time. Like you said, you've been dabbling this for 20 years. I've been at this for almost 10 years already, which feels like it's gone by really fast. But a lot of independent workers and freelancers have been around longer, and so have marketplaces. So it's no longer like you're dipping your toe in uncharted waters. It's here. Lots of large organizations are already doing that. Figure out where this fits within your organization, because ultimately it's going to be a big part of your overall workforce transformation. But you're never going to get to that point that's going to meet the moment of technology driving incredible change if you don't get started now and get past all those brand new, jitters around doing something different.
It's so fun because there are, that you mentioned the uncharted waters, because there are experts such as Steve Rader or John Windsor or John Younger who were freelancers before I was alive. And for me, it was like, maybe it's not that scary after all. And last but not least, name two people I should reach out to talk about the independent workforce.
I mean, to me, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my co-founder, Matt Matola. And I say that not to be self-serving because we were both at Human Cloud, because even when I started working with freelancing at a large corporation, I met Matt and he was doing the same thing. And we shared our stories, our experience. And ultimately, that's how we wound up working together in the future. So he's built an incredible experience that's different from mine as well, having been a freelancer himself, having built business around this. So he has a great perspective. He also has tremendous network and relationships in this world of freelancing. He knew you before I knew you. So Matt Matola, I think, is one of the outstanding experts in this field. Frankly, that's why I partnered with him. The other I'd say is Kelly Monahan. Kelly and I worked together at Upwork. She led the Upwork's Research Institute. She's independent on her own now as well, which happens to, it seems like all of us, eventually we go on our own because we want to, drink our own Kool-Aid. She's brilliant, has great experience in this, and has done and continues to do great research. And I'll actually just throw in a bonus. I think anybody starting, regardless of the side you're on, but especially for enterprises, they need to read the book Work Without Jobs. Work Without Jobs is written by Robin Jasuthasan, and I don't know why all of a sudden I'm going to blank. Robin and a good friend. Wow, I'm going to totally blank on. Give me 1 second. I'm going to grab the book.
Okay.
I keep it. Good friend of mine, John, but now as soon as I start talking, I realized I should bring this up. So I'm going to start from the beginning. Anybody getting started in this space, or even just curious, should read the book Work Without Jobs. Work Without Jobs is written by Robin Jasuthasan and John Boudreau, both who I've met, had tons of conversations with, and interviewed on a podcast in the past. But to me, this is a great starter's playbook for getting around the mindset of deconstructing jobs into those tasks and skills, thinking about work away from jobs, away from the hierarchy that we're used to, and thinking about the best ways to resource getting that work done. To me, it's a terrific starting point. It's a great read. It has a lot of real world examples and case studies. So it's a terrific place to get started.
And it's also great. One more book to my list. So thank you very much for sharing that. And what is the best way to connect with you?
Best way to get in touch with me is on LinkedIn. That's how we got in touch. You'll see articles from me, our own podcast, our Human Cloud podcast, and what we're working on. But you can also reach out to me through our Human Cloud website. Just go to humancloud.com. You can go find a link that says Meet with Tony and set up 30 minutes, and we can talk about your challenges, the opportunities, your curiosities, your favorite books in this space, whatever you want. And I'm very responsive.
Tony, thank you so much for bringing such a huge energy, wisdom, experience, and passion to the space and making it moving forward. I'm super happy that we've met. I'm happy to talk to you. Like I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of learnings myself. So thank you for doing that. And once again, I just loved our conversation. So thank you very much for that.
Me as well. Listen, I'm so glad you reached out. I'm glad we're able to talk about this. We know this is a really exciting, but also challenging space to be in. And I love what you're doing in this space, especially with Freelancer Map. I think you're doing great things. And to have this podcast and get more of that understanding and break down some of those barriers will only continue to accelerate what we know is the real future of work.
By the way, if you are not getting enough of this podcast, go listen to Human Cloud podcast, because that's a podcast that I'm listening myself. So definitely go check it out. And yeah, Tony, see you in the freelance world. And for listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of The Independent Workforce. I hope you've taken one step closer to working smarter with freelance talent. If you enjoyed this conversation, subscribe to learn even more and share it with your colleague. And remember, the future of work is now.